Today on Country Pocket, we have Tiffany Williams. Her debut album is All Those Days of Drinking Dust, and you just heard the title track. Tiffany, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
What does it feel like to be a coal miner's daughter?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't know what it's like to not be a coal miner's daughter, so I don't. It's sometimes you can work on the contrasts of what it's not like. I don't know that, but I can tell you what I think is unique to it. And I guess this would apply to anybody who has a parent in a vocation that's dangerous. You're always worried about them, and you always wish they didn't have to do it. I remember when I was and actually the title track of the song has this in there, the second verse where I say, I didn't know which God to pray to when the cave-in showed up on the evening news. So one day my dad was at work in Southwest Virginia, which is just across the state line. I was in Kentucky, and so the news reported that there was a mine collapse, but they didn't know which one it was or who the people were. They just knew, like, there was, I mean, maybe they knew. We didn't have enough information, and we thought it could maybe be my dad's mine. And so I remember just the terror and just praying and saying, please let him be okay. And I think that was the only scare that I'm aware of. I know there have been other, dangerous situations that he's been in. Maybe I was too young to know, but yeah, it's just that constant fear and the constant wishing that he didn't have to. There's also a pride for people back home. You very recently there was a miner. I don't know. I think it made national news. I saw it on a news channel. I was watching one evening, but the coal miner who went to the Kentucky basketball game and he still had the dust on his face. Um, that is, I mean, when I was growing up, that was really common because if they wanted to make the kids' basketball game or softball game, they would have to go straight after work, and so they would still be covered in coal dust. And so that's kind of a point of pride. That's kind of like the visual manifestation of like, I don't know, you're just proud that they're brave enough and capable enough and hardworking enough to go and do that. And so you're always worried about them and you wish they didn't have to do it, but you're also proud that they are doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you also talk about in the song that you have to see him sort of suffering the side effects of his job.
Yeah. Yeah, well, even right now he has black lung, and so he struggles with his breathing sometimes, and he coughs a lot. And but before it was, he would get cuts on his hands, or one time he hit the roof with his head, and he had a little gash in his head. And my dad's the kind who, if he hurt himself, he would put black electrical tape over top of it and just be done, So there was that. There was also just his knees bothered him, and his back. So yeah, I mean, it takes a toll.
How did you wind up coming from your background and sort of going into language and education and a more, I guess, middle upper class type of work?
Yeah. Well, I will say that back home, coal miners are like they get paid pretty well. So it's not. I know sometimes people might think that it's a lower class job or whatever, but really the miners. I mean, for all the ills of coal mining and everything, they get paid really well, and it's one of the better paying jobs you can get back home. But so I don't look at it as a class thing, or like, back home they would say getting above my raisin or something like that. I don't. It is a more cerebral, less physical path that I chose, and maybe that's, gender norms is a part of that too. I don't know. My mother was a teacher. She was a special education teacher, but yeah, to get into linguistics, sociolinguistics, all of that, I always had. I was always good with language. Everything. I always say that everything I do and I love goes back to language. I'm a lexophile, and I think a big part of that was growing up in southeastern Kentucky and just the musicality of the language and the words that we had that were specific to the dialect, and I was always hyper aware of all of that. So when I was in, I guess it's when I was in college and I would come home. So I went to college only 45 minutes away, but then when I would come home and I would hear things, I guess because I hadn't been inundated with it all the time and I was coming back to it, I I was like, wow, that's an interesting phrase. And so I started writing down everything that they would say that I thought was unique to them, you know? And so when I went to graduate school the first time in East Tennessee, I had a linguistics professor there who was amazing, and he entertained all these questions I had, and so I'm from there. I was going to school at the time to be an English teacher, so I went and did that for 5 years. But then I had such a love for linguistics that was born at home and fostered by people at my at ETSU, East Tennessee State University. And then I wanted to go to North Carolina State and study with Walt Wolfram, who had done a lot with Appalachian dialect. So that's the language part of it. The song part of it kind of came organically. I'd always been interested in music, and so it was a great way to combine, music and then my love for words too.
Well, what was it like leaving the world of teaching for something a little less certain and stable in music?
Well, so the my trajectory is kind of jaunty. When I left, I taught for 5 years. I actually worked right after college. I worked at the School for the Deaf in Tennessee, so there's that language component again too. Then I got my degree to teach. I went back to Kentucky and taught for 5 years, and I think I was ready to leave. I do. Teaching was something that I'm grateful for, but I kind of just got into it because I didn't know what I was going to do with myself at the time. So I left teaching for more security. I went to North Carolina State University to study linguistics, and I was going to go on and get my PhD in that eventually. That was another master's program, though. And the scary part was when I left NC State to go to Nashville, and that there was a lot of crying, and I went into a dark hole because I've always been very structured and very, you get the degrees and you go on and you achieve academically, and that's safe, and so it was a big leap of faith for me to go to Nashville instead of stay in graduate school. um, it was really scary, but I think another thing, two things that really helped me with it were my parents were so supportive and really believed in me, and that somehow made it okay for me to do it, just their approval. And then the fact that I was 30, turning 31, really bothered me for some reason. Like now I'm very much in my 30s. Oh my God, what am I doing?
So your parents were not exactly Carletta.
No, 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 no. That that is more of a, she's like a, that character is a cautionary tale who, yeah, who was very tied down with kids and didn't do her own thing. Yeah. So I guess you could say my parents didn't encourage me to be a Carletta who didn't follow her own path.
So a big theme on this album is sort of standing up for your needs and your dreams. Is that something you wish you would have done more earlier on? Or, do you have you always been able to pursue those big things and those little things?
Well, I think that's another great question. I think that my view of myself has not always been accurate, and in retrospect, I've realized that. Like when I was a senior in college, I studied abroad my last semester, and I went to Germany by myself. So when I wanted to work at the School for the Deaf because I was so interested in sign language, I went and worked there. I wanted to go to NC State. I went to NC State. I wanted to go to Nashville and do music. I did it. So I always considered myself like, I sometimes looked back on my younger self and thought that, oh, like I wasn't empowered, and I wasn't, I was kind of meek or soft spoken. And I mean, I was those things to some degree, but I also always went after what I wanted, always followed through on the dreams and desires that I had. And yeah, does that answer the question? Yeah, I always I feel like I have realized more and more that I'm not the things I thought I was. I'm not meek and unempowered and too quiet and not willing to stand up for myself. I think I am those things, but I think it took me a long time to realize that about myself. I had to cut away some of the other parts of myself that made me think that I was those things.
Well, I'm glad you don't feel that you're those things.
Thank you.
What led you to use such delicate vocals on Carletta?
I think that's just the way that, I am soft spoken and and I do have I mean I can push my voice and I can project and everything, but I think that's just more of my vocal quality. The timbre of my voice is more that way. And I do, and probably too, the tone of the song itself, like if you were just to read the lyrics, and also the way that the song is put together, the tone of that, all of that informs the way you're going to perform vocally. So the fact that I maybe sound softer on that, or more internal, less projected and big, I think that is just trying to be of a piece with the song and to vocally be what the song needs me to be.
Oh, yeah, I thought it worked brilliantly. When
Thank you.
absolutely one of my favorites. I'm gonna play that, and we will be right back.